My Playful Wife, Episode 4, The Shopping Trip, written by Mia. She asked me on a Saturday morning in the way she asked most things, not as a request, but as a fact already in motion, needing only logistics. "I need to go to Lajpat Nagar," she said. She was at the kitchen counter, back to me, cutting something with the focused efficiency she brought to all physical tasks. For fabric and some other things. Piyush said he'd come back next weekend. I thought we could all go. I lowered the newspaper. "Next weekend," I said. He has a gap between exams. She still hadn't turned. The knife moved. "It'll be nice. You haven't been to Lajpat Nagar in months." This was true. I had not been to Lajpat Nagar in months. I was also aware, increasingly aware, in the way you become aware of things once you've started paying a different quality of attention, that the piece of information about Lajpat Nagar was not the actual point of this conversation. The actual point was something else. An arrangement. A negotiation being conducted in the language of the ordinary, which was her preferred language for such things. I looked at her back. The way the morning light fell across her shoulders. The precise movement of her hands. "Sure," I said. "Sounds good." She turned then. A brief look, assessing not my answer but the thing underneath my answer, the terrain. "Good," she said. She turned back to her cutting. I raised the newspaper, but I was not reading it. Piyush arrived on Friday night. I picked him up from the station the way you pick up family. You show up, you carry the bag, you ask about the journey, you fill the drive with the small talk of people who have agreed to exist easily in each other's company. We drove through the city. Delhi at 10:30 on a Friday, still going, the lights and the noise and the ongoing indifferent roar of it. And he talked about exams and I asked appropriate questions, and the conversation was adequate and unremarkable. In the lift up to the flat, he went quiet. "Bia," he said. The lift moved. The floor numbers changed. "Yes," I said. A pause that had specific weight, the pause of someone who has been carrying something and has decided, now, in this small moving box, to set it down briefly. "It's fine, isn't it?" he said. "Between us." I looked at the brushed steel doors. They showed us both in distorted reflection, two men, slightly warped by the metal, standing close together in a small space. "Yes," I said. "It's fine." He nodded. I could see him nodding in the steel, the blurred version of his face doing the thing faces do when attention releases. He needed this, the word, the confirmation, in the way that young people need things said aloud before they can believe them. He was 23. He was still learning that the spoken thing and the true thing are not always the same, but that sometimes you need one to access the other. The lift opened. Saloni was in the doorway of the flat. She had heard the lift and come to the door, and she was wearing the yellow kurta, the brighter one, not the pale one of a few weeks ago, something with more daylight in it. And her face when she saw him was simply, cleanly happy. The happiness of seeing someone you like. The kind that doesn't explain itself or apologize. "You made it," she said. "I made it," he said. I carried his bag in. Lajpat Nagar on a Saturday. If you have not been there on a weekend, you cannot know it by description alone. It is a place that has to be entered. The narrow lanes between stalls, the air thick with the smell of dye and dust and the particular sweetness of raw cotton, the sound of 100 vendors and 1,000 conversations and cloth being shaken out and haggled over, the specific press of a crowd that is simultaneously doing business and living its life. Color everywhere. Bolts stacked against walls, samples hanging from hooks, women holding fabric against themselves to judge the fall of it, children running between adult legs. You have to stay close to the people you're with, or the crowd will rearrange you. I walked slightly behind them. This did not start as a choice. It happened in the natural way of crowds, the press and surge and the path of least resistance, and I found myself a step back, and then two, and then simply watching. Saloni ahead of me, her dupatta a moving piece of color, Piyush beside her. The two of them moving through the market the way people move when they have established a private geography. They didn't touch. I want to be specific about this because specificity matters. They did not touch in ways that could not have been explained. But they moved in the awareness of each other, the slight adjustment when one turned, the half step that kept the distance constant, the quality of attention that a body gives to another body it knows well. I watched this and felt something that I will not simplify. It was grief, and it was beauty, and it was a hot knife somewhere in the region of my sternum, and it was also, underneath all of those, something I still didn't have a clean word for, a pulling toward rather than away. I was drawn into the scene rather than out of it. I wanted to look the way you want to look at something that costs you to look at. She reached back for my hand. Automatic, instinctive, not a gesture of guilt or management, the simple reflex of a woman who knows where her husband is and reaches for him. I felt her fingers close around mine, and I felt the warmth of her palm, and for a moment the three of us were moving together through the market, connected, pressed close by the crowd, her hand in mine and Piyush's arm against her other side. A single moving thing. Then the crowd opened up and we spread apart. I let go of her hand. She looked at a bolt of cloth on the nearest stall. Indigo, shot through with something silver, and touched the edge of it with 2 fingers, testing the weight. Too heavy, she said. Piyush leaned to look. For what? I don't know yet, she said. I haven't decided what I'm looking for. He looked at her. She looked at the cloth. I looked at them both and thought, she knows exactly what she's looking for. Saloni always knew. She just enjoyed the looking. She found the rose silk in the 4th lane. The shop was narrow and stacked floor to ceiling. The proprietor, a small man in his 60s who had the air of someone who had been surrounded by beautiful fabric for so long that beauty had become his ordinary. He pulled out bolt after bolt at Saloni's direction. She was specific without being difficult, precise about what she wanted to see without making it feel like a test. The rose silk was near the back. The proprietor unrolled it with the practiced gesture of someone who knows when he has something worth showing. It fell open on the counter, and Saloni went still. I watched her go still. This is what she was, a woman who responded to beauty with her whole body. She did not perform appreciation. She simply stopped, the way you stop when something true comes into view, and received it. The silk was the color of a certain kind of evening light. Not quite pink, not quite red, something that existed between those things, and had no exact name. It had a quality to it, the way it sat in the light, that I can only describe as interior. It seemed to hold light rather than reflect it, the way deep water holds the sky. She ran her fingers along it. She lifted a section and let it fall. She held it against her wrist, feeling the weight of it against her skin. This, she said. How much? Piyush asked. She shook her head, not answering him. Not yet, still in the texture of it. I don't know what it is yet, she said. She was talking to herself, or to the fabric. Something structural. Something that has to do something specific. She bought 3 lengths. More than she needed, probably, but she bought the way she did most things, with a completeness that allowed for possibility. When you don't yet know what a thing will become, you give it room. We ate lunch at a place Saloni knew, a dhaba she had found on her own, on one of the solo market trips she made when she wanted to look at fabric without explanation. Plastic tables, a kitchen visible through an open doorway, the kind of cooking that had been doing the same thing for 30 years and had no reason to change. The food was extraordinary. "How did you find this place?" Piyush asked. "I explored," she said. "Alone?" She looked at him, a small, precise look. "Sometimes alone," she said. I thought about all the things Saloni did alone, the solo trips to markets, the hours in the workroom with the door not quite closed, the phone calls in rooms I wasn't in, the version of herself that existed in the spaces between our shared life. I had never thought much about those spaces before. I was thinking about them now. We walked back to the car through the afternoon heat, the market thinning behind us, the day going gold at the edges. Saloni fell into step beside me while Piyush went ahead to deal with the parking. "You've been very quiet," she said. It was not an accusation. "I've been watching," I said. She was quiet for a moment. We walked, the sound of the market fading. "And," she said. "And I think," I said carefully, I was finding my way into the language of this, the specific language required to say true things without making them into weapons, that you've been a certain kind of person for much longer than I understood. She looked at me. Her face, which was almost always readable to me in its surfaces and unreadable in its depths, showed something it didn't usually show. Not vulnerability, exactly. More like the thing you feel when someone sees you accurately and you're not sure whether to be relieved or afraid. "Is that bad?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said, which was entirely honest. "Tell me when you know," she said. Piyush came back with the parking ticket, waving it like a minor victory. The drive home had its own atmosphere, the specific quiet of the end of a day that has been more than a day. She sat in the front with me, the rose silk on her lap. All the way home, she ran her fingers along its surface, feeling it, lifting a section occasionally and letting it fall, watching how it moved. She did this with the absorption of someone for whom touch is a primary language, someone who understands things through their hands. I kept my eyes on the road. But I was aware of everything. The heat still in the car despite the AC. The silk in her lap. The way her fingers moved against it. Deliberate, assessing, the same quality of touch she brought to everything she deemed worth understanding. In the back, Piyush had fallen asleep against the window, his face younger in sleep, the professional ease he wore during waking hours dropping away to reveal the boy underneath. At a red light, she turned and said something to him about the silk, whether he was asleep, whether he'd heard her. He wasn't. She turned back and looked at the fabric in her lap. "It doesn't know what it is yet," she said. Not to me specifically, to the silk or to herself. "It will," I said. She looked at me, a sideways look, quick and complete. "You're different than you were," she said. "Yes," I said. "From before October." "Yes." The light changed. I drove. She went back to the silk. Her fingers kept moving. I thought about what different meant, whether it was loss or growth or both simultaneously, the way most real changes are both. I had lost something, the comfortable assumption of a particular kind of marriage, the ease of not knowing. But something else had come in to fill the space. A quality of attention that I had not had before. A willingness to receive things as they actually were. I was not sure this was better, but I was increasingly sure it was more real. Piyush left Sunday evening. He hugged Saloni at the door, a real hug, arms fully around her, her face turned into a shoulder, his grip tight in the way of someone communicating something through the body that the mouth won't say. Brief. Complete. The embrace of two people who have chosen not to make this into a scene and are succeeding. Then he turned to me. He shook my hand. He held it. He looked at me with the expression of a young man who is carrying something large and knows the person in front of him is also carrying it and is choosing, for reasons he doesn't fully understand, not to put it down. Next month, he said, if that's okay. I looked at my brother, thought about the lift, the blurred reflection. It's fine, isn't it? The weight of what he was asking now. Next month, I said. He left. The lift went down. The corridor was empty. Saloni stood at the closed door with her back to me and her hand still on the handle, and she stood there long enough that it meant something. Thank you, she said, quietly, barely above a breath. For what? I said. She turned. Her eyes were not wet. She was not a woman who wept easily, but they were near the territory of it, close to the surface. For being you, she said. For being the specific person you are. I didn't know what to do with this. I had been bracing for many things in the weeks since the kitchen, and gratitude was not among them. Gratitude required a generosity I hadn't been certain I possessed. Go to bed, I said. You're tired. She almost smiled, a compressed, careful almost. She crossed the flat and kissed my cheek, warm and deliberate, and longer than a cheek kiss usually lasts, her hand resting briefly on my chest. Her fingers pressed there. She went to the bedroom. I stood in the living room. Outside the city. I turned off the lights one by one and went to the window and looked out at the ongoing dark, the lights of 1,000 other lives carrying on in their own arrangements, and I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. And then underneath that, neither does she. We're inventing this together. And underneath that, quieter than either, good. The equal mystery of it, that she too was navigating without a map, that the confidence of her body did not mean the certainty of her heart, that we were both here, in this flat, choosing this without entirely knowing what we were choosing, settled something that had been unsettled since October. I turned off the last light. I went to bed. She was on her side, breathing slowly, the rose silk draped over the bedside chair where she'd placed it before changing. In the dark, it was just a shape, just fabric, but I knew its color, and I thought about the market, the lane, the small proprietor, the way she had gone still when it was unrolled. It doesn't know what it is yet. I closed my eyes. There is a thing that happens between people in the hours after shared experience, a particular loosening, a quality of being with that doesn't announce itself. We drove home, and neither of us reached for the radio. The city went past the windows. Piyush was asleep in the back, his face young and open, and Saloni sat beside me with the rose silk in her lap, and I drove. I thought about the market, the narrow lanes, the press of the crowd, the moment her hand had reached back for mine. The automatic quality of it, the reflex of a woman who knows where her husband is even in the middle of a crowd. That reflex was real. Whatever else was real, that was also real. Can I ask you something? I said. She looked at me, the question in her eyes. The silk, I said. When it's made. When the blouse is finished. I paused, finding the right words. Will you wear it for me? Before. Just for me first. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, a traffic signal going red. I stopped, the city moving around us. Yes, she said. Simple. No calculation in it. Okay, I said. The signal went green. She looked out the window. Her fingers moved along the silk. I could hear Piyush breathing slowly in the back, deep in his sleep. I make things for specific purposes, she said. The fabric tells you if you know how to listen. It tells you what it wants to become and who it wants to be with when it's done. What does this one want? I said. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, to be seen, she said, by people who know how to look. I thought about what I was learning these months about looking, about the difference between seeing the surface and seeing what the surface held. I thought about the version of myself that had walked through 3 years of this marriage looking without seeing. I'm learning, I said. I know, she said. I can feel it. We turned onto our street. The building ahead, our balcony visible from below. Saloni gathered the silk into her arms carefully, the gesture of someone returning something precious to its right place. Thank you for today, she said, for coming. I wanted to, I said, which was true, I understood now that I said it. I had wanted to be there. I had wanted to be in the market with both of them, not as a surveillance, not as management, but as presence, as the third side of something. She looked at me with the expression that meant she understood more than I'd said. Good, she said. That's good. To be continued in episode 5. The rules change.
Simbolo di copyright Mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 4 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.